A very good evening to all of you. Very good evening, sir. Anjan, sir, very good evening. Today we are going to start a webinar on market and their functioning, some facts, encounters, and implication. Sir, we welcome you.
Hello.
And now I would like to give a brief introduction about Sir. Sir is currently Professor Emeritus at the Center for Economic Studies and Planning in Jawaharlal Nehru University. He has taught at GNU from 1973 and retired as the RBI Professor of Economic Theory at the CSP in 2010. In between, on leaves of absence from JNU, he also taught policy London School of Economics, Cornell University, and the University of Tsukuba in Japan. Subsequently to retirement from GNU, he held the position of Country Director of the International Growth Center program in Bihar from 2010, its inception, to March 2017. His research has been recognized by fellowship at the Institute of Social and Economic Research, Osaka University, during 2002-2003. After retirement, he was the General Jawaharlal Nehru National Fellow of the ICSSR from 2011 to 13. During 2011 to 17, he was also honorary visiting professor at the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, New Delhi. His area of interest and research are mainly in economic theory. He has published papers in various world-famous journals like Econometrica, Economic Letters, International Journal of Economic Theory, Pacific Economic Review, Keio Economic Studies, and so on. His most celebrated book is on Walrasian and Non-Walrasian Equilibrium, Introduction to General Equilibrium Analysis, Clarion Press, Oxford. Thank you, sir, for coming, and thank you. We welcome you, sir, again. Now, over to you, sir.
So, thank you, Dr. Singh. It's a pleasure to see so many people. I have not said hello to Nitto, so I can just see him. And Surbi.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
And Arun.
Yes, sir.
Long time.
Yeah, very nice to see you, sir.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking which Arun this is, right?
Arun Kaushik, sir. 2009.
Yes. Hello, Rajiv. So let me begin.
Hello, sir. I was on mute. I'm not sure if you remember me or not. Unfortunately, all the time I was in CSP, I never got a chance to study from you, but I always saw you and heard about you and in your other lectures. So, of course, I was looking forward to this lecture after 30 years of leaving CSP. So my desire to listen to you has fructified after 30 years.
Well, thank you. I don't know how to react to your thing because I hope you enjoy yourself today. That's
Yes.
all I can say. Well, what I'd like to do is to begin by telling you a bit about, before I start looking at slides and so on, is what got me into thinking of these kinds of questions that I'm going to look at. You see, the years that I spent at NIPFP got me into thinking about the role of the government. And in fact, the director at that time was Dr. Govind Rao. And he kept talking to me saying that you must think something in terms of what should the governments do. You see, there are two kinds of theories about or beliefs about what the government should do. If you look at the current scene in the US, we begin with US because that is always a point of reference. There's a presidential election is on, and the two presidents have completely different views of what the government should be. Trump would like a government not to be entangled with anything at all, not involved with anything to do with any policy. Whereas the Democrats, on the other hand, want the government to do a large number of things. In fact, I think the the most comprehensive debate that I have seen is between two people, and there's a book on it. I think Buchanan and Musgrave. There's a debate that was in the year, I think, 1999. That's not too many years ago in Munich. So they had a debate, and these two guys were two different views of what the government should be. Of course, you know who got the Nobel Prize. So basically, you know what side the Nobel Committee was on. Buchanan got it, and Musgrave, who's basically a Keynesian of sorts, lost out. There's no reason to say that Musgrave was a worse economist or no. But I wanted to approach the question in a different way. I thought that instead of saying that whether we should have a large government or a big government, and of course, how do you measure the size of a government? Usually by the amount of government expenditure or as a percentage of GDP, let's say. That's mighty confusing because if you look at the data, there are all kinds of countries. Some do well, some not so well. So it's got nothing to do with the size of government as such. So I went about it saying that, look, how are the economies set up in recent times? And in recent times, what happens is that the economy is all around markets. Now, whether you like markets or not, markets work. And work in sometimes bewildering ways, and it throws up all kinds of solutions which you may not like. So I'd like to spend some time on that and then come back to what the government should do. So that is really the realm of what I'm going to cover. So it's amorphous, and I'm not going to do any theory except report some results. So let me share screen. I hope you can see the screen, right?
Yes, sir.
Surajit, the screen is on.
Yes, sir. It is visible.
So let me begin with some facts. I have called it markets and their functioning, some facts, encounters, and implication. So some facts are theory, points of theory. Encounters are some stories. So being an old man, I would like to tell some stories too. And these stories would have a bearing on what markets do, and then we'll look at implications. The first is, the first is the fact one. How are markets supposed to work? Now, this is the biggest myth that has been there in the literature. The fact that the market's forces is something called the invisible hand. And this is supposed to be an Adam Smith creation. And everyone says that in The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith used the term invisible hand to solve the problem of the market. Well, if you study Adam Smith, it's not at all clear what he meant by the invisible hand. The only thing I can say is that it has nothing to do with the working of the market forces. So Adam Smith mentions invisible hand once in the history of astronomy, which was completed around 1758. And then in his book, The Theory of Moral Sentiments in 1759, and then again in The Wealth of Nations in 1776, in addition to the references in the last was made not while discussing markets in books 1 and 2, but only in book 4, where Smith was advocating support of domestic industry over foreign. There is nothing to do with markets. So what was the invisible hand? Well, my only guess that I can make is that he must have meant by the invisible hand, the hand of God. Because remember that Adam Smith was someone who was a great moralist. And he believed markets would work only if people were moral. So we'll come to that. So having dispensed with the invisible hand as a way out, what do we have next? Is fact 2. Fact 2 is if markets are competitive, efficiency is attained, and this goes by a name called the first fundamental theorem of welfare economics. Whether this should be given such a name is something that one might wonder. Whether this is actually true and whether it should be called a fact. But since it's the cornerstone of contemporary welfare economics, and since markets in which players use methods to control results are pursued by governments, we shall call it a fact within quotation marks. Now, even now, I think 2 days ago, you had a news report that Google was being pursued by governments because of something that they had done. The third fact is something that people believed, but there was no actual demonstration of this fact. And I came across it in a very peculiar way. So let me tell you, I was presenting something in front of my teacher, and he didn't say while I presented it. This was in 2010, and he was 90 at that time, so he was not too well. So then we went for lunch, and he stopped midway, and he said that thing that you constructed, that meant that people were cheating, weren't they? So I said, yes, they were. You might say that. He said, you can't have that. You can't have people cheating. So then I realized that since he was one of the person I'm talking about is Lionel Mukherji, he's one of the founders of General Equilibrium. If he thinks that people should not cheat, then that means that was one of the assumptions. So then I figured out that if you have people in an equilibrium that we talk about all the time, the fact is there will always be agents who prefer to deviate from competitive trades. So competitive trades are not generally best responses. Now, this is part of the folklore. I couldn't find any proofs. Then finally, in a series of papers, you see, it's very difficult to characterize equilibria of various kinds, various types of production structures, whether there is uncertainty or not. So in a series of 3 papers that I wrote, I showed why this may be so. So things may go wrong in various ways. Violation of fact 2, for example, is something that those of us who teach in various institutions, we teach our students. So I have this table, which I think is quite helpful. You see, the first column tells you what kinds of problems may occur. Let's do it column by column. Externalities, we all know what externalities are. There can be positive externalities or negative externalities. There can be asymmetric information, the product quality, uncertainty, breakdown of contractual agreements, which may occur in any transaction. That's my fact 3. That may occur even when you are buying your sabji. Because when you buy your vegetables, it's a contract between you, the buyer, and the seller. So the seller might try to sell you at a different rate by reducing the quantity that he sells. In fact, or selling you the bad quality. So there are problems, and that may happen. And then markets with uncertainties. Now, these are when the future is involved. Again, the nature of equilibria that you study here is also different. But you can think in terms of an equilibrium today based on your expectations of the future prices. But being individuals, you would all have different expectations, and that is what triggers problems. So corrections suggested in the literature, for instance, the second column, there are several kinds: Pigouvian taxes and property rights. This goes back to a long history from the time of Pigou and down to Coase, saying that, you see, now here, look how the government is going to come into play. Because if you look at the third column, the government, the judiciary, and the police, for example. Why the police? Because you'd require someone to actually prosecute the fellow who's not paying up, and so on. The judiciary, because there may be a case involved. The government, because the rules have to be formed, and so on. Now notice in each of the right columns, there is the government. And the government and the judiciary. And the rule of law. Now, so far as the third thing is concerned, detection and penalties have to be imposed, because if you give substandard quality, you should be penalized. Now, who's going to implement that? Again, government in framing rules, and police and judiciary in ensuring compliance. Markets with uncertainties, well, again, here, there should be no insider trading or control by agents who have private information from manipulation of prices. Now, these are things that requires a bit of demonstration, but allow me the privilege of saying that this can be shown. I have shown it. There is a reference to something that I have written. And bodies such as the SEBI in India. Now you can see the kind of trouble that is happening with SEBI, for example, is all predicted, because if you don't have the bodies such as courts to ensure no conflict of interest. None of this is new, by the way. This is something that we can expect exactly if we read our former experts or those who thought about things. Notice the role that the government has, a major role to play in keeping the markets on the straight and narrow. And you need a separation of powers, since otherwise incentives would get distorted, as we have found in recent times. Now, let me give you where the problems may arise. You see, the first story is what happened when we went on a trip to Naivasha in Kenya. See, the economic advisor to Kenya Prime Minister happened to be a friend. He had invited us, Satish Jain and myself, another person that you may know from CESP, to study the theoretical problems that the market economies may face if you have, as in Africa, large number of tribes who have very different tastes. So whether that creates any problem, but that's another question. What I'm going to talk about is what was happening in Naivasha. Naivasha is a nice resort, very nice actually. But the main source of income for this nice resort is horticulture. So flowers were grown and exported to Europe. But in trying to keep the flowers fresh, a lot of chemicals were used. Unfortunately, the chemicals were draining into lakes. There were many, and all the lakes were interconnected. As a result, the hippos were dying. Also, people working in these industries were also falling sick. So the mayor, who had come for dinner, for one of our conference dinners, wanted advice on how to deal with this. Now, everyone remained quiet. Now, our host, as I have said, was a friend. So he said, Anjan, come on. This was also an interdisciplinary group. There were some economists, the historians, political science, all kinds of people. So the host asked me that, look, Anjan, why don't you say something about this? So I said, well, it's the standard theory is that the polluter pays. Now, from the other side of the table, there was an explosion from a very influential economist who shouted, that's exactly what shouldn't happen, since then jobs would disappear and growth witnessed would no longer be seen. I persisted by saying that maybe then assign the property rights to the people of Naivasha and the hippos too, maybe. But effectively, the polluter would have to pay. And the point being made that firms would then leave. So the question, therefore, left most of us bewildered because how can you argue? But we should have known better. We forgot about a memo from the World Bank which advised polluting industries of the West to locate their industries in Africa or other undeveloped parts of the world. I suppose that's why Union Carbide came to Bhopal. Now, you can see the story of the toxic memo that Harvard magazine that I have referred to. It's there on the net. Incidentally, all the persons involved in both the accounts are eminent economists. And I'm not making this up. My colleague Satish Jain was a witness to the haranguing I faced. In fact, the guy got a Nobel Prize a few years down the road. So notice that when I said that you can correct by imposing laws, the difficult part is ensuring that the laws work or complied with. There would be lots of pressures. Now the second, let me not waste too much time. I have lost about 5-7 minutes. The second is, what kind of service do we get? Now, how do we buy an important product in our country, for example, quality of service, any capital goods? You talk to various people, find out whether you know an important person or not. I can tell you how I bought a car, for example, the first time I had money. At that time, our former student, I think he's president of the Alumni Association, BVR Subbu. I think he was then the president of Hyundai. And I asked him, hey, Subbu, I need to buy a car. So can you suggest? So that means I got a car delivered, and for the rest of the life of the car, I drove it for 15 years or so. Whenever I took it to a Hyundai showroom, it was always shown to be the president's car. That is what appeared on the screen. So you can imagine how or what kind of service I got. But this shouldn't happen. It should be the kind of service that everyone gets. The story I'm going to slur over, because that is what I want to say, that look, that if only the government would hold up people with tardy behavior or wrongful behavior and would ensure that the guilty would be punished, then not only would good quality of product, but also no violation of laws of the land. Fair, just laws and prompt assurance of justice from courts are necessary for markets to function properly. This is not a novel conclusion as we see below. For instance, if I quote from Arthashastra, you'll notice that Chanakya says the king, and of course the king means the government there, should be diligent and remove all obstructions to economic activity. In fact, that is the first cause for free markets. The pursuit of the people's welfare and the economic well-being of the society is dependent on the scepter wielded by the king. So maintenance of law and order by the use of punishment is the science of government. And when no punishment is awarded, then there is only the law of the fish. Unprotected, the small fish will all be swallowed by the big. And the presence of the king maintaining just law, the weak can resist the powerful. So this is very, very comprehensive about what should happen in government. So that was Chanakya. You move down, you come to Adam Smith in 1755. And look at what he says. Little else is required to carry a state to the highest degree of opulence from the lowest barbarism, but peace, easy taxes, and a tolerable administration of justice, all the rest being brought about by the natural course of things. So notice it's very clear that the government has a role. The next is Milton Friedman. Now, Milton Friedman, as all of you would know, is someone who talks about government not being interfering with things. But look at what he says. The government's major function must be to protect our freedom both from enemies outside our gates and from our fellow citizens, to preserve law and order, to enforce private contracts, and to foster competitive markets. So notice, preserve law and order, enforce private contracts, exactly what I was talking about in my examples and my encounters. This is Mansour Olson, is a political scientist. Now, he makes a distinction between two types of bandits. One he called the roving bandits, and the other is a stationary bandit. Now, he says no society can work satisfactorily if it does not have a peaceful order and usually other public goods as well. Obviously, anarchic violence cannot be rational for a society. The victims of violence and theft lose not only what is taken from them, but also the incentive to produce any goods which could be taken by others. There is accordingly little or no production in the absence of a peaceful order. Thus, there are colossal gains from providing domestic tranquility and other basic public goods. And then the latest is the State Authority from Beasley and Person. State Authority is a book called pillars of prosperity. State authority and tax systems, court systems, and democracy co-evolve in a complex web of interdependent causality. So you see, the government has a major task. See how accurate the voices of the past were. Strangely, this is not emphasized strongly enough. There is some discussion about whether government should be large or small, minimum government, maximum governance, for example. The essence is lost. Now, what I shall do next is to present some noteworthy data. I came across it quite by accident. You see, when you look at what we discussed so long, and if you recollect that table that I set up a few minutes ago, let me see if I can get it back without causing any crashes. Here, this one. You'd notice, look at the role of the government in running of all the various kinds of markets which may, in fact, not work properly. So the government, the judiciary, the police. So it occurred to me that how do we not just confine attention to the justice part of it? Apparently, there is something called the World Justice Index. Now, it is well, I mean, this is what I said a few minutes ago. How do we mention everything? Government has a major role to perform. We have discussed these roles. Difficult to perform from my examples. Now, how to keep the government on track? So you have the role of civil society and free press, and role of the private sector. In fact, this book that I referred to, I came across it later on, is edited by Luigi Zingales and others. It's on Milton Friedman's 50 Years Later. It's published by Pro Market. Its argument for corporations having social responsibilities, that maximization of profit is not the sole object of monopolistic corporations. So you see, things are changing, and these are the kinds of stuff that is getting into policy making. So not only must you maximize profit, but there are other social responsibilities in step. So notice no one talks about efficiency as being the ultimate objective of policy planner. But that is why markets are to be kept free and competitive. And then to do that, we have to ensure other properties too. Notice the preponderance of law and order machinery in getting there. What about focusing attention on just that? An NGO, the World Justice Project, has just done that by creating the Rule of Law Index. Oh, sorry. The following things are considered, following points in components of the index. Now, the extent of government powers. What kind of powers do the government employ? Whether there is corruption or not, whether the government is open or not. Fundamental rights, whether they exist and their importance in daily life. Order and security, and regulatory enforcement, civil justice, criminal justice. And these are, if you will think for a few minutes, are exactly what you need to enforce that the markets are efficient. So, can you see this slide? Can you see this?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Can you please make it full screen, sir?
Can you make it a presentation mode? In the presentation mode, it will be full screen.
Yeah, I'll just try to see whether I can make it larger. Yeah, this is better?
Yes. Yes, yes, sir. Perfect, sir.
Now, these are the first 20 countries that are listed according to these index. I mean, one is the highest score. And you know, the first country is Denmark, Norway, Finland, Sweden, Germany, Luxembourg, and so on down the line. Now, clearly more work needs to be done to provide our governments with list of doables. But suppose you tell the government just to do this, get the score high on the rule of law index, law index. And then what happens? If you look at the countries at the top of the list, one point should be clear. The countries that we call prosperous are all at the top. And we wanted to get the markets to function properly, then these are the countries. Good governance usually takes to mean the increase of social opportunities and removal of poverty. We take the prevalence of the rule of law to be a sign of prosperity, for then the weak are protected. That is Chanakya. And basically, policymakers consider ways of increasing per capita income, though. Talk about high GDP. Notice that the highest per capita income, Luxembourg, does not figure in the top 3. It's only number 6. Nor does Ireland, which is second highest per capita income, figure high. It's only the 10th. Norway figures high on both, being second on per capita. Denmark is only 9th on the per capita. New Zealand is 8th in the rule of law, but 22nd in the per capita list. So list picks up different things. Thus, targeting GDP or per capita GDP is not the main thing, it appears. That is if you are interested in prosperity or running the markets properly. I'm afraid we are going to crash again, it seems. Oh, no. So look at there is something called the prosperity index. So forget about the rule of law index. Look at only the prosperity index. There's something called the legatum prosperity index. There are 12 things. Now, there is a lot of overlap between the two indices, right? As you can see. Safety and security, personal freedom, checks and balances on government power, social capital, investment environment, enterprise conditions, infrastructure and market access, economic quality, living conditions, health, education, and natural environment. India is 101 out of 167. Notice the overlap with WJP, the World Justice Project. But there are many pillars which do not figure at all in WGP calculations. However, consider the index. Now notice, if you look at the index that's being constructed, you can see it's roughly the same countries on the top. That I thought was surprising because World Justice Project only looks at a subset of things that they look for the prosperity index. Yet they turn up the same things. And of course, I have some data on the GDP per capita, but I don't need to get into that. And the fundamental point is that the rule of law is a must for markets to function appropriately. This is crucial. In fact, we have laws aplenty. We need to enforce them quickly, fairly, and impartially. In fact, if you look at it from the point of view of India, for instance, we have our constitution. If you only see to it that Articles 14, 19, and 21 are enforced, and everyone gets a slice of them, what their due is, then there is nothing that you need to worry about. We have our laws. It's just that it is not enforced properly. I have to say that many years ago, just in ending, in 2009 or 10, I think Dr. Singh, while in making some comments about my career, mentioned that I had been in charge of the Bihar IGC program. I think Surojit briefly considered to be part of us at that time.
Yes,
But I
sir.
think he did not take it forward. But at that time, there's one experiment that the Bihar government did. I don't think there is any other government which did that. Unfortunately, that experiment did not last for a long time. But in 2009 or 2010, I think, there was a kind of belief that criminals should be behind bars. And it did not matter whether the criminals belonged to the ruling power or not. So, with the remarkable effect on criminals, some major faces were put behind bars. And that immediately relaxed a lot of Bihar because there was a lot of unrest, all kinds of things were going wrong. And we all thought at that time that things would change. It did change for a short while, but it did not make appreciable difference because they did not follow suit. So this is never done because governments in power usually lock up criminals or those who are accused of various activities. But these are people who are belonging to the opposition. That is not the way to do things. If anyone violates the law, he should be put behind bars. Only then can the economy thrive. And for the economy to thrive, the markets must work properly. So that is all that I have to say. And I'd like to stop here. I think I've talked enough. And if there are questions of any kind or whatever, I'd be happy to take them. I've talked for about 45 minutes. It may have been slightly longer because of my crashing of the computer. It is a problem I have, but anyway, that's it. That's what I thought I would present with you and share with you what I think is essentially wrong with our economy, why we cannot get to, maybe we will become the largest economy in terms of GDP. But it wouldn't make anything unless we change these kinds of things. That is, ensure that there is a fair and just law and order mechanism. Now, purely personal note, I must put all my cards on the table. We filed a case for our pension in the High Courts of Delhi in 2009. It's still not done. It's caught up in the Supreme Court, where JNU keeps filing appeals one after another just to delay matters. And the court does not get to resolve things. Now, whether we get it in the end or it comes to us after we are gone, I don't know what is going to happen. But surely this is no way of running things. People would say that, look, what about your pension is a very small thing. Yeah, it is true. It's a big thing for me. It's a very small thing for the rest of the economy, for example. But this shows exactly what is happening in the economy. There are just too many things that get referred to the courts And they never, if you see movies, you see that there's one decision at one court and everyone is happy the decision has been taken. Here, there are actual life, there are always appeals. There are always appeals. So people keep on just pushing it back. What is this?
Thank you very much, sir. It was a fascinating lecture, very thought-provoking. I'm sure there would be a lot of comments and questions from the participants. But before starting question answer session, can I request the participants to switch on their camera, please, so that sir can see some faces. If you can please switch on your cameras, that would be nice.
I hope it was not
So-
too much of a burden.
No, sir, not at all. It was very enjoyable. At least for me, I enjoyed it thoroughly. So, who will start?
So I have put some of my. Can you hear me, Surajit?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I am Rajiv. I have put my question in the chat box also, but I'll repeat here. First of all, sir, it was a pleasure listening to this. In Hindi, we call Gagar mein Sagar. So all our questions related to non-functioning of markets, they've all been put into a very, very crisp perspective for us to digest. It'll take us a long time to digest all of them and formulate our thoughts, what's wrong in the society and what needs to be done. It's come up with a very crisp manner as was expected, and that's why we all are here to listen to this talk. So my question was, when the government, judiciary, police, everything becomes part of the market process, that is what we see today, profit maximizers in a way, including the parties and everyone. In fact, I do not know, I didn't want to make it a little political, but when Mr. Modi came to power, he said, I am a businessman. I know how to run, how to maximize profit. I'm a Gujarati businessman. So I'm saying he only said, but that's true of almost all the politicians and the people in power, they are basically maximizers, not the supervisors of the economy. So how do we expect the economy markets to function when the government, judiciary, everybody becomes participant in the market process?
Okay, my reaction to that is that if by maximizing profits, they are not violating any laws, then there's nothing that you can do about it. And they should be allowed to maximize profits. But if they are maximizing profits or increasing their profits by selling you a substandard stuff, which is what happens, then they should be hauled up. I mentioned, for example, the case of Union Carbide. Or, for instance, consider what happened in Naivasha. The poor hippos were dying. There's a lot of money coming in. The horticulture farms were making a lot of money. So why weren't they able to stop it? So either they have to say, sorry, we don't want this growth. Right? So if by maximizing profits, they are doing some damage, then you can take it out, and the courts should function. See, the problem is that we ourselves are not incorruptible. So the fault lies with us. The markets are doing their job perfectly. This is what the markets will do. It will flow exactly. It will provide you incentives of the appropriate type. So you'll have to see to it that the incentives are correct. So once you do that, then things work. Right? But if, for example, there is a law which says that this good has to be prepared according to the following specification, and the good is not prepared according to that specification, then it should be possible for you to go to the courts and say that, look, this guy has given me a substandard product. And the court should immediately haul that person up, fine that person, make it impossible for him to stay in business. But it doesn't work that way. Why? Because the courts take a huge amount of time. Right? So that is the problem. We need a lot more courts, and we need them to act fairly. Right? Unless people are sure that if you want to bend a corner, you're going to get caught. And many years ago, my first PhD student was Jaljit. Jaljit has, I think, maybe just retired. I don't know. He's in Imphal. He worked on income tax laws. And I had him look at what kind of things would increase compliance. Now, two things came out of that study. One was, not only should there be a penalty, but there would be a very high chance that you would get caught if you violate. Both together. To have a law to say that if you commit this crime, you'll be hanged, and then have no chance at all of the person being caught, then what's the point? Right? So these two things together. So it's a very, I'm not trying to say that all this is easy. No one said this was easy. But I'm trying to show how something which is seemed unrelated, is the functioning of markets, is actually quite related to the running of governments. And so the question of whether you have a large government or small government, well, that's a silly question, because the government should be large and efficient enough to carry out all these tasks. Right? But no one talks about the judiciary and the police. You know, the Bihar experiment, the only thing that happened, and I thought that was really a very smart move, you had the Chief Justice of the Patna High Court and the DGP of Bihar Police. They sat down together and they said that, okay, there are criminals. We know politicians are not going to be after us if we catch their people. And they didn't for some time. So everything stopped. And Bihar for a year or so was a different place altogether. But it didn't last, unfortunately. And we did a study on Bihar some years ago. In fact, Arvind Panagaria and Govind Rao asked us to do a study of Bihar. And there, at the end of it, our end date was 2012. So 2012, Bihar looked very rosy. So we had put in a warning. We don't know how long these things would last. So we don't know what's going to happen. I don't have a crystal ball. And someone who was reading, he said that that's a very gloomy forecast, and make it more optimistic. And I put my foot down saying that, look, I just don't know. So thank God I stuck to it. Otherwise, I'd be looking at something which is really quite strange. But does that answer your question, Rajiv?
It does partly, but
what part I have not answered? Tell me.
The part you've answered it completely, but it still answers partly because the assumption is that the government acts without breaking the law. Unfortunately, all the players in the government are also part of the society who also fall into the same market failure incidents.
Wait a minute.
Asymmetry of information.
I have not assumed anything about the government. What I'm saying is what the government should do. Now, if the government doesn't do it, I can't help it.
Right, sir.
I'm telling you what the government should do. When if the government doesn't do it, I mean, what can I do?
But unfortunately, no government does that what they should do. That is where we are stuck today.
No. Wait a minute. I did say that there has to be the civil society and the free press, which can act as a pressure on government or any other body to perform the job. Now you will tell me, why should they do it? Of course. Why should they do it? So there are systemic failures at each level. So it's not only the government. After all, if it is a free country, we elect, we get the government we deserve. Now you say, well, elections are rigged and so on. Okay, then what about the people who run the elections? They're at fault. So if you have failures at each point, right, so this is something that you can predict, because this is what comes out of, if you look at everything as performing a service, then you're buying this service. And why you get a substandard service is something that what we talk about. So it fits. Now, in many places, again, but unless there are more questions, I'm just talking to Rajiv, it seems. And others may say that you didn't give us time.
Sir,
So,
can I?
see, I can tell you another story, but I will if there's no other question. All right. So I'm
Sir,
not
can I
saying
come?
that the government should do this. If you want things to happen, then these are the jobs that the government should do.
Surojit, is anybody in the queue, or I
Oh,
can?
wait a
Sir.
minute. There's a question from someone.
In the
Oh, it
chat
disappeared.
box,
How do I go back to that question that appeared?
I can read it loud for you. It says, sir, given that in the capitalist system, not only workers are exploited by the appropriating the surplus value created by their labor, but also workers become less wealthy than capitalists. How is it fair a scenario so as to ensure smooth functioning of markets? Isn't there a rule of law for markets to function properly in this case? So it is basically the inherent exploitation. It is a question about even fairly working markets are also exploitative. That is the question, I guess. That is the gist of the question.
Yeah, well, if markets are being exploited, then there are people who should correct it. I mean, that is what I'm saying. If there is no one willing to correct it, then they won't get corrected. You'll be subjected to all kinds of things, right? So it's not necessary about capitalist systems or not. Everywhere where markets perform, there is this. You think markets are very good in Russia or in China or in North Korea? They're not. There something else works. The fear that the president might come and kill you or something if you don't do the job. This is not a job that you wish to do. It's not something good for the country, but you see, they are coerced. So that happens. Similar things may happen here also, which we don't get to hear perhaps. They're hidden. So these are things that we are forced to do. But that is what comes out of exactly the kinds of things that I talked about. The fact that there's a breakdown of contractual obligations. If you're all free to do, you see, in the world at large, whenever someone is not behaving competitively or trying to set the price or trying to grab a large share of the market or what have you, there are laws which are put up. Now, the laws don't work, maybe. Why are they being constrained? They're being constrained because the rules say that you can't do this. And my question is initially was, why do you have such laws then? Why do you say that you can't have Google telling you what to do with information? Now Wikipedia is being challenged because of something or the other. Amazon is being charged with something or the other. Why? And this is all over the world, actually. So they have laws because they are supposed to be competitive. So my question was, what good is competitive behavior? The problem is that you are being told to be competitive so that someone else on the sly can go and do something else. So someone would respond to it in a way which is different. So that will control without others knowing that the price can be controlled. So I tell all of you that, look, I'm going to sell this product. You should buy. This is a good price. We all agree this is a good price. And I tell you, quietly sell you a substandard product. Why do I do it? Because it gives me more profit. And I know I can get away with it. If I know that I can't get away with it, I won't do it. So that is the thing. So now you tell me the government does not do it. So if the government doesn't do it, I'll get away with it. So things would be a mess. And that is what happens.
Sir, there is one more question in the chat box. Akash Bharti is asking that the implementation has to be effective. My question is, if a government imposes a tax on the production of plastic bags, but consumers continue to use them at the same rate, what does this suggest about the effectiveness of the tax in reducing plastic pollution?
Well, you see, again, this is the thing. Just by setting a tax is not going to make it work. If you don't catch hold of people and ask them to pay that fine or pay the tax, you just do whatever you want. So not only must you have a tax, but you must see to it that it is enforced so people pay up. So then they will they'll realize that it's not worth my while to use plastic bags.
So Rajit,
right now, for instance, in
But
our society, we have a problem, with the monsoon, water collects. Now, if water collects, the mosquito breeds, and then there's dengue or something, or malaria. Now, the only thing that you can do is tell people that, look, Baba, you keep the neighboring areas clean. There should be no water collecting. It doesn't happen. But because of WhatsApp and so on, every day there are pictures that in front of your house there was this, in front of your house there's that. How do you enforce? So enforcing is a problem, and it has to be enforced by whoever is in charge, or the government. Now you might say that the government is not doing a right job. Yes, but then you try to get rid of the government.
Nitoda wants to ask some questions, sir.
Yeah, sure.
thank you, sir. It's a fascinating lecture, and I must say I was a bit apprehensive while joining. because I thought your lecture might be full of mathematics and I have lost touch with mathematics now. But you took to a very different plane and level, and that was very fascinating. My question is related to your those two indices, rule of law and prosperity. GDP is of course different.
Yeah, no, wait. Before you get into asking me about the indices, I didn't
No.
have,
It's
I'm
not
not
about
trying
indices.
to, how shall I say, propagate these indices. No,
No. I'm not at all saying that.
but that's
What I'm
all I
saying is
have.
that
I mean, I don't have any other data.
yes. So what I'm saying is that I see a very striking similarity. If you look at the social welfare programs, of the governments, these countries which are at the top, they also have very, well-established social welfare programs. Health is free, your future is, your unemployment goal is there. So is it something like if people do not face a lot of uncertainty about future, government or society, whatever you say, takes care of all your needs, your need for being immoral,
Wait,
and
before you
amassing wealth
proceed,
is reduced.
Nito, let's just answer the following question. Why do these countries have these social welfare programs? Because they are a part of the rights of the society, people living in their country. Don't we have such things? We have right to this, right to that. We have all kinds of rights. Do we ensure that they have these rights? We do not. So that's the difference.
Yeah.
So it's not a question of, you see, ensuring that people get their rights. That's why I said 1914, 21. You just ensure that's in our constitution. You read 1914 and 21 and ensure it will be a different country.
Yeah, somehow we have the legal rights and government did not care to enforce. To give example of right to education. It's all there in law and in books. But go to school, the schools are not there, the teachers are not there, the classrooms are not there. So how do we ensure that?
So what we try to do is to fix the problem, that is, build schools, see that teachers are there. We don't realize what the problem is, that if you do not perform, then you're going to be hauled up. That you must perform. These are things that you must do. We do not do that. So you're right. So these are all countries which ensure that whatever is due to each member of the society, it happens, and that's why the markets work. And it's a capitalist or whatever kind of country that happens. Oh, there's someone talking about efficiency, equity, and so on.
Sir, I'm
Showmenda wants to ask.
sir, I was yeah. So I have got
no, but there is no trade-off.
No, so that's what I'm saying.
There is no trade-off. You see, people who say there is a trade-off, that is just wrong.
That is what I'm trying to argue.
To put the efficiency in place, you have to do some things, right?
Yes, sir.
If you don't do these things, you won't get efficiency. What I'm saying is, the hypothesis is, and this is where Nito picked up the indices, I don't have any other data, but if you look at these countries, what they did was, they ensured that everything was efficient, and once they did that, everything fell into place. There's no problem about equity.
Sir, in fact, can they be complementary? If you ensure efficiency, you can also ensure equity.
Sorry, Nito?
Complementary.
I'm asking, can they be complementary? If you ensure efficiency, you also, promote equity.
Or the other way around.
Quite. I mean, in the sense that if you want to ensure efficiency, then you have to do some things which seem to indicate that you will also get equity of some kind. You see, right now I don't have data. That's a good point to investigate. And if there are some young scholars willing to go the distance, is to look at inequalities in all these four countries that I talked about. Right? What are the levels of inequalities in the country where there is the rule of law?
By and large, the inequality is much less in these countries, the ones which are listed on top in the two.
That's what my hunch is, but I don't have the data, so I can't tell you.
So, but then another point that I wanted to draw attention of the forum was that most of the countries in that list that are on the top are also small countries in terms of population. Like Nitya mentioned, USA, China, India, nowhere. India, in any case, we had not expected, but they're nowhere figure in that top list.
Sure. In
so
a
size
big
of the
country,
size
it must be more difficult to ensure all of this, right?
Right.
Of course. Of course.
So I've got a second observation, a very brief observation. I was actually talking about the role should government play to provide primary education and primary health to ensure a level playing field exists before we
Shobhan, my point is that surely you should do this.
Yeah.
But that is not out of some goodwill, right? It is something that they are entitled to.
They are entitled to.
There's a question of entitlement. We ourselves, by our constitution, we say that these persons are entitled the right to education, for example. We say this. And then, as who was saying that there were no schools and no teachers and so on, you said, or maybe Rajiv said this, I don't know. But this is something that happens.
So my second observation is, the calculus of consent written by James Buchanan and Tulloch, 1962, Buchanan is talking about a paradox. And the paradox is that in the market, we are all self-interest driven. But when we work in the public sector, we have to be different individuals. You have to gear up to be different individuals, and that does not happen. So his analysis of government failure in his public choice approach is based on the assumption that we happen to be self-interest driven even when we're working within the government sector, and that explains corruption to a large extent.
You see, everything happens.
Yeah.
I'm now convinced that if you fix this one goddamn thing, you fix it well, then all the others would be solved. The difference of behavior between public sector and private sector should all disappear. Right now, there are just too many problems because people may do whatever they wish to because they have some politician in their pocket and so on, and then things become completely different. So, there are people who are manipulating the markets. If they manipulate the markets, would do exactly what they say. That's what I'm saying. Don't blame the markets. You blame the fact that you don't have the correctives in place.
I had one question.
Yes.
Any observation if the government is short of resources?
Oh, the government is short of resources. Yes, Sharath, I saw your question. Well, it's a bit like the government is supposed to do these things. Now, if you tell me that I have to do various things, I said I don't have the resources to do all of it, but I'll do partly. So maybe you do partly. But the resource question is often, you think in a society, they won't get too many things done. You see, by the way, if you look at all these places which are high on the list, whatever list you choose, they all have, and this is a question that was asked, if you look at the amount of money, or the percentage of money they spend, government expenditure as a percentage of GDP is all very high. So you have to have money to do these things. no question. If you don't have money, you won't get to do so many things. But you'll at least be able to ensure a certain level of, how shall I say, law and order, without doubt.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, if you don't have resources like any of these advanced countries, you won't get to do these kinds of things. That's for sure.
I agree.
Sir, there is a question in the chat box. Survi is asking, sir, when other institutions do not perform, judiciary may haul them up. But when judiciary doesn't perform, who will haul up the judiciary?
Good question. There has to be someone. I mean, why do we have the Lokayuk? Now, who will haul up the Lokayuk? Now, you see, there is always a question of who is going to correct the boss, kind of.
Opera, you want to ask something? Opera, are you there? Okay. Sir, there is another question by Deepankar in the chat box.
Okay.
Sir, are you arguing that government should just ensure rule of law and leave the rest for the market? Or are you saying that once the government has ensured a rule of law, it can legitimately expand its role to other areas too? I see a similarity
No, the
of
government
that.
should just stop. I mean, after the rule of law, what is there to do? You see, the government is not into the rule of law. The government has to make it possible for there to be courts and other things. And after that, naturally, there'll be a demand. I mean, for instance, schoolhouses, training of teachers, all that falls into place.
Sir,
So
may
you
I
see,
ask?
once the tasks are assigned, like I'm told that I have to teach so many hours per day. I have to supervise so many students. If I don't, then I should be hauled up. Right? Now you tell me that the person doing the haul up happens to be my uncle, and therefore I can negotiate a deal. Well, even then I should be hauled up, but then the person who should be hauled up is one level above. So this thing just goes on. So if can't be solved, it can't be solved. But this is the reason why we are stuck.
Sir, I have a question. Can I ask? Sir, do you think in a political system which is privately funded like ours, where market is sponsoring the political system, not only the elections but running of political parties or different political formations, is it feasible to have the kind of things which you are suggesting, that government should do this, government should do that? If government is formed in a democracy which is privately funded and funded by market, then obviously they have to cater to the market interests in some way or the other. Then I mean, do you see a contradiction, or do you think that it is still possible that government would be able to do the things they should do according to your argument?
No, you see, there is one thing that I should have stressed, maybe. When you say that the government is formed because of market interest, you are already imputing something which shouldn't be there at all.
Right, sir.
If it is the case that I am paying a lot of money into a particular government, and that government gets to be elected, that party gets to be elected, not government, form the government, then what happens? Would that party be responsible to whoever paid the, maybe. But then it should not be like this. It should not be the case that you have some parties paying into private parties putting in money, then everything is lost. You know, why do you think all the stuff that we see that is happening around us is happening? Is because of we have not been able to get the laws of appropriate laws in place.
Yes.
And two things. We have not got the appropriate laws in place, and we have not got the appropriate people to pursue them. You know, there are no fast courts. Nothing is happening because of that. Things get stuck. Today, for instance, in a university or in any institution, if someone takes a decision which is unfair and you are affected, what course of action do you have? You are told to go to the courts.
Yes. But
What do? You go to the courts and it takes years. And meanwhile, the person who took the decision gone off somewhere else. So he or she is not affected. And the person who is affected suffers, they cannot get things done right. So there are problems. Why? Because if it was known beforehand, you know, this is the important thing. If it is known beforehand that if you violate a rule which is there, or don't do what your job is supposed to be, and you'll be hauled up, and you'll be fined, you won't do it. You will not violate rules. But we don't have these rules. And that is all. I mean, that is all that I'm saying. It comes out beautifully from that table that I set up. You'll see exactly how the markets would destroy efficiency or equity or whatever you want to call things. They won't be happening. You won't get them.
is there any
So
other
the
question?
danger is, there is a danger that you might get suddenly a dictator who controls everything, right? So where everything is very fast action, you're shot dead and so on. So of course, that is not going to help either, because that is not the kind of situation that you want. But none of the countries where there's the justice index is like that. And North Korea doesn't figure very high on that list.
Is there any other question or comment or anything?
I had a question. Can
Sir,
I ask?
Sir, yes, sir.
If we can think of the decentralized form of government, where the panchayats also come in the picture to ensure governance, better governance.
No, well, some panchayats are very well run. Some panchayats are very well run because you see, they have more information. They know exactly what has to be done to get various things done. So they would do that if they want to run the panchayat properly. And some panchayats are not well run. That is precisely the kind of problem that you have. So in the panchayats, the markets operate, not very much required. If they buy and sell, there is tight, how shall I say, control over what the price ought to be, what should be the reward. So there are things which are worked out and a better control. But that is the question that someone else said, that all the countries that are at the top are small countries. The smaller the country is, the better equipped they may be to do all the things that are required. No.
Sir, I have a small question. Is that I want you to speak about the rule of law a little more. I give you an example. The Land Acquisition Act before 2013 was used for even for setting hotels and swimming pools and all that. And that is the reason for which new law came up in 2013, which has very stringent conditions for what are the purposes for which the land can be acquired. So I believe that what you said as rule of law, there will be certain other qualifications as to what we mean by rule of law. That's all, sir.
Yes, you see, we set up a law and then we violate that law itself, isn't it? For instance, in our society, those of you who have come here, you'd have noticed there's a huge amount of land in front before that highway was built, which suddenly the government took up and then they gave it to DLF. Now that was supposed to be green area. We were supposed to, there were trees there. We were not even supposed to build a boundary wall. So all that was just taken over. We are fighting a case, it's going on. That land is still ours. But there are now the metro runs on it and all kinds of things.
Thank you, sir.
So once a law is formed, of course, there should be a debate about whether the law is just one or not, right? Now, it could be that there are problems at that level, right? So suppose you negotiate problems at that level and have a just law. If you have a just law, then it may not be implemented properly because every time there is an incentive to violate that law because you know that you'll get away with it. Because getting away with it is highly profitable. So if you shut that point, then work backwards, then things would work out. But what is difficult is shutting that point, right?
Thank you, sir.
Sir, there is one more comment in the chat box. What you mentioned possibly comes close to what Hayek said too. Not sure if you mentioned him or I am mistaken though.
Sorry, I didn't get you, Surajit. Can you
I
read
think
it out again?
Hayek, yes, is your argument similar to Hayek's argument? That's what Dipankar is asking.
The argument?
What you mentioned possibly comes close to what Hayek said too.
Oh, Hayek. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. If I come close to Hayek, I mean, maybe I come close to Hayek. But
And
I don't know. But you see, Hayek also said a lot of things which I don't sometimes agree with. But if I said something, but I have not said anything new. I have shown you a whole lot of things what people have said. From Chanakya to Adam Smith to Milton Friedman. I know people of different philosophies altogether. When they have gotten together and come to a... The question is why? They don't give reasons, right? Why is it that Friedman's followers now think that corporations must do the right thing and they have a corporate social responsibility? Why is that? 50 years after Milton Friedman himself would not have said it. Maybe. But he said enough. He said enough what the government should do. He didn't say what the government... in fact, the people like Coase and others, their main reason was that government should get out of setting taxes. So what did Coase say? Coase say that you assign property rights, right? Now, provided you ensure those property rights, who's going to ensure those property rights? Right? So the government must step in and say that, hey, by the way, this is his, or this is the property of the person A or B or whatever. So that has to be ensured. Immediately you see that has to be a backup of law and order and judiciary stepping in to bolster that thing. And I think that there has not been a sufficient recognition that this is what you need.
So if there is
someone
no
says
more
Hayek is the last sophisticated proponent
yeah,
of what...
Mahmood
Wait a
Ansari,
minute,
sir.
I gave you a lot of others who came after Hayek who said the same thing. You know, look at a political scientist, Mansour Olson. What is he saying? He's saying the same thing. And also about Tim Besley and this fellow Parsons. That's 2011. That is much later. What are they saying? So this has been said over and over again. But what I'm saying is taking the thing a step further, saying that what is it you require the government to do to carry out all these activities? If you tell the government you have to do this, that, and the other, you just have to ensure that the government has enough enabling power to see that people have their fundamental rights are guaranteed. That's all. Fairly. Now you might say that's a tall task. Well, then that's a tall task. You need a big government.
So if there is no other pressing question, we can end the session. Now, sir is speaking for more than 1.5 hours now.
Yes,
so, thank you so much, sir. I mean, I am your student. I cannot. Of course, I know that you cannot say no to your students, but On behalf of Delhi Economic Society, we are immensely grateful for your time, for the effort you have put in, and for this fascinating, thought-provoking lecture that you have delivered, and also the question answer session. I must thank all the participants who have participated actively as well as engaged with the talk. So we thank you all, and let's see. I mean, we'll have another session, and with Sir, we would try to organize one session. I mean, not online, but physical session, maybe in JNU or somewhere in Delhi, as soon as possible.
Yeah, I prefer a blackboard behind me, basically.
Yes. So maybe in room number 205 again.
205.
Well, yes, we will organize one special lecture according to your convenience, sir.
I had to
And
tell you, when 205 was being built, I had to insist on a big blackboard. And everyone kept on saying, why do you need a blackboard? You know, these were people who didn't write. I mean, not in our center, but this was in the school. I kept on saying that, look, I mean, we need big blackboards, good quality blackboards. हाँ फर्क पड़ता है. Why you just make me write one or two?
so now that blackboard has been
Has gone,
divided to, yes, I mean, half of it is still there. 2/3 of it is still there, but 1/3 has been converted into smart.
I don't like these fancy
whatever
boards.
board, yes, which works sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't, but still.
It has stopped working as usual.
Yes. Today I was taking a class and it was not working. The light
It's
was
not
coming,
working.
yes, but I could not show the slides. So
Nothing works here. We are
Thank
a
you.
truly
Thank you very
remarkable
much,
nation.
and I hope I didn't bore you too much. That's all.
not at all, sir. It was extremely
Thank you,
thought-provoking.
sir.
Sir.
Thank you. Extremely.
No, old people have a tendency to talk too much. So
You are always interesting, sir. I mean,
Always a
we
pleasure to
love
listen to you, sir.
Yes,
Always
we
a
would
pleasure.
love to organize more sessions with you. I mean, according
Thank
to
you.
your convenience. And with your permission, sir, can we close the session now?
yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.